So in order to deploy it, what we want to do is actually create our deployment script. We haven't done that yet. And we're going to put our deployment script next to our migrations. So we're going to put it in our migrations folder, because essentially our deployments are all going to be migrations. And hopefully that's starting to make sense. And hopefully that's making sense for you. So in the migrations folder over here, we're going to create a new file. Here we're going to create a new file. Oops. And we're going to call this deploy underscore contracts.js. All right. So we've got a JavaScript file over here. Where we can set up here where we're going to deploy our tether, our first contract. So what's the first thing we should do? Well, just like with the run migrations one, we need to bring in the actual tether contract, right? And we can do that here. I'm just going to go into the migrations and copy this. You know, we're going to take the whole thing. I'll just copy this and paste it in here, save some time. And we're going to rename this to constant tether, right? Artifacts.require, and we're going to take tether. And we're actually just going to make this an anonymous function that runs our deployment. And we're going to make it async. And it's going to take it's going to take an argument of, what do you think the argument should be? Well, it's going to be the deployment, right? And so as we can see, this is very similar to our run migrations. The only difference is we're setting it to tether. And do you notice anything else? Well, we've actually created an async function. And what is an async function in JavaScript? Well, essentially, async allows us to run our JavaScript code asynchronously. And what that really means is it's just in the sense where we set up our functions to send out a promise. JavaScript is going to run synchronously. It's going to run down. We know that it just runs, and that's how it works. You know, it's not multi-threading and running a bunch of things. It's running down JavaScript. So how can we get it to wait for things to happen before it should move on? How should we get it to wait for code to execute? How can we get it to wait for things to return, like when we're fetching, API, or when we're fetching things that necessarily aren't going to come right away or come in time for we want time, which will cause our code to crash? Well, what we can do with JavaScript is use this very, very powerful tool, and is essential when it comes to especially working on JavaScript on the web. With JavaScript, when it comes to waiting for information to process, the async await. And I really do encourage you to look up async await if you've never heard of it and this is confusing. Honestly, it's confusing for pretty much most developers, to all developers. The first time you hear about it and you're learning about JavaScript, you can be like, especially if you're just starting and coding in general. But really all it means is just to think about it as something that is waiting. And that's why we have the word await, that we don't want it to deploy until we have all the information that we need to deploy Tether. And this is really important with the blockchain, right? Because we need that information. And just like that, hold on. Let me just tell you what we just did here, because you can get a little bit excited. I know we didn't write that much code in our Tether contract or in our deployment contract yet, but it may feel that way, but we have effectively created our entire environment. So let's go ahead and deploy it now and test out a deployment, see if we didn't make any mistakes in the code. Hopefully, fingers crossed, our Tether contract can be deployed successfully with everything that we've built to do so.